Hello, and welcome to Around the Political World with John Rothman. I am John Rothman. If you're a fan of the show, make sure to hit the follow button on the top right of Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you are listening at this very moment. When you hit follow, leave a review or share an episode with a friend. It helps other people discover the show, keeps us going. As I like to point out each and every day, it expands our base. We begin this morning on a solemn note. The terrible disaster at Ronald Reagan National Airport, the destruction of a plane carrying too many people, and, of course, the Black Hawk helicopter with the pilots and so forth. It's a tragedy, and all of us feel it deeply. The media is covering it, and it should be covered. These kinds of accidents, thank heaven, are infrequent, but when they take place, we are all touched deeply. Thank God we have a federal government and an aviation system which has prevented these accidents from happening, over and over again. That is what we pay for. That is what we pray for. That is what we need when we get on an airplane and fly. I don't know about you, but when I get on a plane, I feel absolutely secure. I have no doubt that I will board, relax, and arrive at my destination safely. That's the beauty of American air traffic. The tragedy on this solemn morning is that so many people died, and evidently they're going to investigate, find out why, but it won't bring them back. But I wanted to open with this thought because, one has to. One cannot ignore what is going on in the world. But I want to talk about the political world. I think it's very important that we do that. And I want to begin with the observation that hearings will take place on Kash Patel and Tulsi Gabbard. And yes, there is another hearing on Robert F. Kennedy Jr. And all of that is taking second place to this disaster. And I guess that's the way the news cycle goes. But these confirmation hearings and what happens will be critical. I want to point out the solemn obligation of the United States Senate in advise and consent. In fact, I recommended the other day that everyone should read the book or see the movie, Advise and Consent, just to get a sense of the high drama around these things. Yesterday, the Vice President of the United States, JD Vance, said to members of the Senate, Republican members of the Senate, stay in line, vote for these nominees. And there was an implicit threat that if they didn't, there would be some sort of retaliation. Immediately, my memory went back to the Jordan rule. Idaho Senator Len Jordan was very upset when then Vice President Spiro Agnew tried to lobby members of the Senate before a critical vote on the floor of the United States Senate. And the Jordan rule was created. And I want to quote directly, whenever I am lobbied by the Vice President, I will automatically vote the opposite way. That was October 31st, 1969. It is important to understand that simply because a president nominates does not mean that a confirmation is automatic. After listening to Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and the hearings yesterday, I would never vote for Kennedy for any position like the one that he has proposed for. Can you imagine Robert F. Kennedy Jr. being head of Health and Human Services? I am horrified at the thought of Kash Patel. All you have to do is read his history, understand that he is revenge-driven. He plans to turn the J. Edgar Hoover Building in Washington into a museum against the deep state. This is a man who has no business in the FBI. And as for Tulsi Gabbard, former representative, a Democrat who is now a Trumpist and a Republican, look at her history. She has no business being director of the idea of collecting intelligence. 18 agencies dealing with intelligence would be under her purview. It's nuts. I am delighted to tell you that there is opposition to Patel and to Gabbard. 22 Republican leaders have said they oppose Kash Patel. Now, none of them are in the United States Senate, so it may not make any difference. And the opposition to Tulsi Gabbard grows every single day. But make no mistake, these nominations deserve to be front of the line in terms of our consideration. We need to know what's happening. Not only that, did you hear that in the Department of Defense, they've suspended celebrations of Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday. They've suspended celebrations and commemorations of a variety of events, including Holocaust remembrance. Why? Because, well, that is the whim of the president and the will of the Secretary of Defense. There is something wrong here. And the reason I labeled this particular discussion patterns of abuse is because there is a pattern that has grown in this administration, a pattern of abuse that scares me. We are seeing the implementation of Project 2025, although we were told by Donald Trump he'd never even looked at it. We are seeing now Bolton, Pompeo, two leaders in the Trump first administration who've not only been stripped of their security, but even more shocking, General Milley, a distinguished American warrior, had his portrait painted and hung in the Pentagon. By order of the President of the United States, that portrait is being taken down. Why? Because this is a president motivated by personal revenge. I want to point out that we are once again talking about Guantanamo. President Trump indicates that 30,000 illegal migrants may be transferred to Guantanamo for holding. This is something that we need to understand. I believe these are indications of a much broader abuse of power. And this, my friends, is a fact. If the Democrats control the Senate and the House, I don't think Donald Trump would get away with it. But there is nothing to stop him now. You remember what Donald Trump said? He wanted to be a dictator on day one. He's not a dictator, but the whims of this president are being carried out in such a fashion as to no doubt cause us all to be concerned about the abuse of power. No doubt about it. Thanks for tuning into another episode of Around the Political World with John Rothman. You want to make sure to follow along and let me know your thoughts on the show by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts and sharing an episode with a friend or colleague so we can continue to grow and expand. That is, of course, our goal. I want to remind you, you can interact with me on LinkedIn and Facebook and, of course, through email. And I especially want to thank Gogo Zoger, the wonderful producer of this podcast. We'll be back tomorrow with another episode of Around the Political World with John Rothman. See you then.